tried to answer some questions that we have tackled during the first panels. We have succeeded in answering some of the questions. We failed in answering others. We will try now to talk about the prospects for Yemen. Of course, the conflict in Yemen has become regional. We have a strong game of interests as we have tried to detail today. We will open the floor to shed light on some aspects that were not highlighted throughout the day, including scenarios of the development of the crisis in Yemen and what are the possibilities of solution. I would like to give the floor to Dr. Azmi Bshara, the director of the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies. Thank you. So I would like to, I'm sorry for not being here throughout the day. I would like to tell you that this seminar has been programmed a month ago, and with the participation of several parties in Yemen, including people who had been mentioned today without being represented. So after the decisive storm, the date was postponed or changed, and also the representation of Yemenis who are not in Yemen today. Some people have been stuck outside, some people are not. So if you have any remarks regarding the representation, I hope that by explaining this, I would have answered some criticism that is justified. It should have been 2.5 days after the decisive storm, so based on what happened, we had to do it this way. That was the first point. Secondly, I would like to talk about my opinion regardless of the complicated society and political structure of Yemen, because we cannot cover these topics in one day or of course not in a summary. I have some notes regarding the topic. I think it's important to talk about during this session regarding the repercussions of the decisive storm regionally. The conflict between the Arabs and the Iranians, it's of course his personal opinion, not the opinion of the Arab Center. If we take this into consideration with Dr. Khalid Al-Dakhil's notes regarding the GCC countries, particularly Saudi Arabia, counterbalancing power in the region, there's also obligations. It's not only a statement. If we really talk about decisive storm being the beginning of a counter role by the GCC countries, it is not a privilege. It is a heavy burden and implies several obligations. GCC countries could have done away with them in the past, or being playing the role of an observer in the past. In 2003, during the invasion of Iraq, that had put Iraq out of the scene, what was the role of the GCC countries? If GCC countries think that they have a major role to play now, there are several obligations or several burdens, and I think it will require changes from within, and not only when it comes to the foreign relationships. It means that a lot of people or a lot of structures should be built. A different structure of the society is not only based on the providence state. So I would like to highlight one point only, which is If Iran deals with the Arab societies by dividing these societies against the Arab governments, how can we respond to this approach? Because people who want to lead the battle based on Iran's attempt to gain the allegiance of the parts of the societies, of Arab societies, these Arab societies will no longer believe or pledge allegiance to their governments. We should highlight the importance of loyalty to the state, and it needs a major change when it comes to the Arab speech. We need an Arab speech, not a Sunni speech. Where is this speech? If we are talking about an ideological Sunni speech facing a Shiite political party, this is an invention using the Sunni as a denomination. It has never been the case. So we are transforming the Sunnis into a minority, not by numbers, by mentality. And we would be losing these parts of the society and sending them to the opposite side. People who want to lead this battle, they should be in charge of the speech. Imagine Iraq. We have all talked about the loss of Iraq. How can you face Iran in Iraq without the Shias of Iraq? ISIS is the only part who faces Iran this way. Nobody else can do it. When it comes to Arab countries, we should understand that Shias are also Arabs and we need to target them and win them. And most of us, of course, I know that we have our deductions when it comes to the nationalist approach, especially when it comes to the democracy. And now we have seen how some nationalists have had positions vis-à-vis the revolution or the Arab Spring. When the idea was still dominant, the Shah couldn't have won the Shias. Saddam Hussein fought wars with half of the military from the Shia. People who want to face Iran, they have obligations, major obligations, because if somebody is talking about division, you should reply with a unifying speech. And I think that Gulf countries in particular should ask this question: do we want to lead this battle? This is a basic of this battle. You did well when you talked about Iranians, not Persians, because the elite, the ruling people are not Persians when it comes to the ethnicity. We're sorry, we cannot hear any intervention without the use of the microphone. We are not talking about ethnic groups. There is an attempt to build like a national approach based on the Shia denomination. When you talk about Arab, when you say Iranian Arab, so you are unifying the Arab countries, which is different when it comes to Iran. So there's a different speech, and it is not like an opportunity that happened, and you can keep on going using the same word, the same terminology, the same speech. We should give deep thoughts about how to lead this battle. And another point I wanted to mention regarding the pattern, that the recurrent pattern, not specifically in Yemen, but generally when it comes to Yemen. I'm not an expert when it comes to Yemen, although I follow closely what's happening. There's a pattern that is being repeated in Yemen, Arab revolutions. We are mistaken if we don't take it into account. I think our brothers in Saudi Arabia, who are leading now the war, the campaign, if we don't take it into account, we will fall back into the same mistakes. It was a real revolution, by the civil society in Yemen, in Taz, and in Sana'a. Some tribal forces have bet on this. However, the people who were responsible for the revolution have been marginalized. The youth, democracy, civil society has been marginalized today. The fight is against old parties or other people in Yemen. This is what happened in Egypt. We hope that it will not happen in Syria. However, the whole idea of the counter-revolution in the Arab world is the alliance with the old elite and states, with some parties that have joined the revolution for different reasons without believing in democracy and plurality. And I think this is being repeated in Yemen today. I was following our hourly the battles in Yemen. The Houthis were there, and some others placed their bet on the alliance with the old state to do like a counter revolution in Yemen. I think if we fail to see this, and if some secular elite parties in Yemen do not see this, take this into account, it will be a mistake. Our brothers in Egypt, who did not believe plurality, they believed on the military and on the old system. We saw the result. The difference in Yemen that hampered this process and will hinder this process is that there are differences that do not allow the party whose bets were placed on to rule. For sectarian reasons, for regional reasons, do not allow a party to control the entire Yemen. It is not a homogeneous. It's not a society in harmony when it comes to, for example, in Egypt, the military could control, but in Yemen, a party or a group of people cannot control the whole country. As to the action of the Gulf, it should be taken into account that there were some mistakes in the past since the initiative of the Gulf, of the GCC, and some GCC countries have placed a bet on Ali Abdullah Saleh as alternative for Al-Islah and reconciliation with Ali Abdullah Saleh and his son, fearing that the reformer Al-Islah or the other parties might be in power. So if we do not take into account that the key to Yemen, including like creating a strong military force on the ground that is capable of securing the country and putting a limit to the expansion of the Houthis, whether we're talking about divisions of the military that recognize the legitimate government, or Al-Islah, or alliance with Al-Islah, there should be an approach with the legal government and not like what happened in Syria, like dealing with tribes. The biggest mistake today, if the GCC countries decide to deal with the ground or the forces on the field without talking about or with the legal leaders, whether we're talking about the Prime Minister or like a Minister of Defense or the Assistant Ministry of Defense. It is against the idea of sovereignty to have a foreign force with forces battling on the field. See what's happening in Syria. How can we link between the opposition of Syria, the coalition, and the people who are fighting on the ground? If you can reconcile between them, and it's very hard to do. So any planning for the future of Yemen to have a strong military force on the ground, the military recognizing the legitimacy, the tribes who pledge allegiance to legitimacy, and the non-state armed groups, including Al-Islah and other groups, they might be the heart of military for securing the country, but the leadership should be a legitimate leadership to secure the concept of sovereignty. I'm not talking about the long-term future. I'm talking about pressing tasks that we need to carry out. The last point is regarding the fact that we are constantly hearing, I'm talking about the Arab political speech in general without going into details. I'm not talking about conspiracy theories using religious parties as a tool by some political parties. It might be true. For example, Anwar al-Sadat invented the strength of Islamic movement in the 70s to face the nationalists, and it might be true. We might see the intelligence relationship through the governor of Asyut province. However, when it comes to the religious parties, are considered or considered him as well a tool. So it was a two-way street. Uh, some people think that IS is a tool, but on the other hand, ISIL is considering that the others are tools. Some people say the Americans invented Al Qaeda. Maybe Al Qaeda invented the idea of being supported by the Americans to secure its own interests. Secular and religious movements do not consider themselves tools in the hands of other parties, and people are mistaken when they do so because these parties think they are using the other party and not the opposite. So the major question is, Ali Saleh might have used this topic, and I agree with our colleagues, maybe not 100% with Mr. Abdul Nasser. His lecture was excellent, but when it comes to the negative role of Saleh, so letting them fight the war, it might be true. However, for the Houthis, it's not relevant. It's not important. They have other objectives far more important than his assistance. And I think this is also the case with Al Qaeda and other movements. It is, we're talking about dangerous movements, regardless of the source of these sources. People who thought they might be tools in their hands. So we shouldn't give this question more thought. Undoubtedly, Ali Saleh used Al Qaeda to extort the Yemeni society and the international society and the Arab society for three different reasons. Saudi was extorted by Al Qaeda or through Al Qaeda, the US in a different way, and in Yemen he says it's either myself or chaos. However, if we think that Al Qaeda is a tool that will go away should Ali Saleh stop using it, we are mistaken. They have their own interests. However, we are talking about movements with their specific dynamics. Some people are ready to die for their objective. I don't think that Ali Saleh is ready to die for any objective. He is ready to kill, but he's not ready to die. And there's a difference between people who are ready to kill to achieve an objective and to die for a certain cause.
Thank you, Dr. Azmi. Mr. Abdussalam Muhammad will be discussing some possible scenarios. I would like to speak in general about the situation in Yemen and the new reality created by the decisive storm. The Yemeni problem, if we want to give a description to it, we have two projects, an Imami project, which allied itself with a family or clan rule, which was totally exposed in 2011. Both projects linked their fate to each other. So therefore, the continuation of these two projects means the continuation of instability in Yemen unless we go back to trying to democratize Yemen, as was the demand by the revolution of 2011. As for the Houthis, right from the start, they really allow themselves to be used as a tool rather than behaving as someone with a vision, because when they achieved what they could not achieve in many years as a result of the national dialogue outcomes. If they were to turn themselves into a political party and behave as one, they would have taken all the seats in the north or the north and northern parts of the country. I think their mistake was they allowed themselves to be used at local level by Ali Abdullah Saleh and regional level by Iran. So therefore, they continued using armed violence, and now they are reaping the results. All the achievements they have managed to achieve are now being lost by the Houthis. Once they managed to gain control of the state, they could have either chosen the path of sharing with others, and this is something which could have been accepted by other Yemeni powers and at the regional and international levels, yet they chose another path, and that is imposing their control by means of military means. And in my opinion, this can mean, it can only mean one thing, and their demise. The decisive storm was the only logical outcome of a country like Yemen, which has a strategic importance for all Gulf countries, and when it fell into the hands of an armed group, and this is something unacceptable to Gulf countries, especially when this militia allies itself with a regional power like Iran. And although I know some aspects of the Houthis are acceptable and can be dealt with, but they decided to burn all their bridges, as it seems. So therefore, the military and security aspect, at least, the decisive storm has created a new reality, and also at the political level it has created a new reality, which means now there is international legitimacy represented by a UN resolution which does not allow any armed militia groups sharing power unless through the outcomes of the national dialogue. What we need now to know is what are the possible consequences and repercussions of the decisive storm. First of all, the army and the Ali Abdullah Saleh army losing their military capabilities, and some of their commanders turning into warlords and bandits. And also we have a war economy now, which can only mean more wars in the future. Also the chaotic situation as a result of weapons in the hands of everybody. Also Al-Qaeda benefiting from this situation and expanding. Also the sectarian aspect of division in society. These are very dangerous at the military and security level. As for the humanitarian aspect, of course, which is very important, the suffering is increasing, especially in main towns and cities, the lack of electricity, drinking water, fuel, the closing down or inability of hospitals and schools to do their job, chronic illnesses, scarcity of foodstuffs, and etc. And of course, if you add to that malnutrition amongst women and children, all of this can lead into more suffering, more divorces, and more illnesses. Of course, the weakness and the demise of many political parties, especially the Popular Congress, and which was made up of two factions, one of national outlook and another one which solely allied itself with Ali Abdullah Saleh and his family. And also we have the problem now with many politically organized youth leaving the ranks and files of their parties and joining the armed groups. And if we compare that, when there was a time when the political parties provided a catalyst and an alternative to armed groups, now the lack of trust in the political factions is creating an opposite effect. And also I think the situation can mean one thing, and that is the exclusion of the Houthis, and this is something which is not desirable. And if that happens, maybe we will. I think the Houthis themselves have led us all into this war, which may result, amongst other things, to excluding themselves, and the political side of their work is almost completely disappeared, and all what remains is the military aspect, and also the weakness in the team which is leading the transition after the collapse of the state, and some smaller political groupings may be encouraged now to come to the forefront of we have three clear scenarios in Yemen. Either the Houthi movement going back to the outcomes of the national dialogue and the Gulf Initiative, or they giving in and faced by this military campaign, and the reorganization, of course, of the military establishment is very important, and having a national army, because for example, the elite forces of the Republican Guards are 70% of them belong to certain areas, and also the popular resistance, if not supported, will turn into militias, which will really harm any future state. The establishment of something to replace the Ministry of Defense, because if we don't do that, a military unit, every day a military unit will leave the army and join either the Houthis or the Qaeda or someone. Also, Al-Qaeda also should be targeted, and even if the Houthis or some of their leaders reappear on the surface again under a different name, and also from the south, the southern agitation movement also, they can reappear again, resurface again under a different name, and some emergency economic help and support, transitional justice, immediate humanitarian response, Also, for the political priorities should mean that everybody who are willing to give up the armed struggle and joining the political process should be allowed to. So the Houthis should be encouraged to act as a political party and give up factionalism, sectarianism, and armed struggle. And also, finally, to try to reinstitute the revolution of 2011.
In the name of God, we have talked about the political aspect a lot. A lot of people have talked about the necessity of a military solution. I think that Mr. Azmi has spared me of 70% of any solution repercussions in Yemen. If we want to adopt the military solution, I do not adopt the military solution. However, if we want to follow this path, we have to pay the price. It is not prominent, it's war. And the war is always linked with atrocities and suffering before being linked with victories. The Yemeni people today is suffering from at a very basic level. The people need water. The people of Yemen need food. They have money, but they don't have food. We couldn't provide money. We can provide, food or water. The Yemeni people want the injured people, the wounded people, defending the war that we have fought with them. We couldn't provide these needs. If the military operation continues without taking into account the humanitarian aspect, we will lose the people of Yemen. Even if we win the war against the Houthi, the Yemeni people should be convinced that this war is for the Yemeni people. Of course, there are sacrifices. However, the war in this case started because of our mistakes, and we have decided the launching of the war. We didn't take them into account. So how do you want them to side with us? I think that the military solution is an option. Eventually, if we want like a political party and Houthi and Al-Islam want the military, it will become like a dialogue of death. So if people want like a military solution, I think we should do this. And the Palestinian Authority are always talking about a political solution, although Israel every day is launching a new war. If one of the two parties does not want the peaceful solution, we cannot force it. If Ali Abdullah Saleh and the Houthi want to impose this solution, then the military solution might be the ultimate option. And if we want to resort to this option, we should be ready. How? We should be realistic. The decisive storm was quasi improvised. It's an impromptu. It is a correct measure, and it is a quantum leap when it comes to the Gulf culture. We can say that, yeah, we can launch like an operation. However, we were surprised that the decisive storm stopped and the people were not ready. We have been surprised that the decisive storm has started. We were taken by surprise. We went to the war. We should pay the price. It is not it is not the war of Kuwait and Doha. It is the war of the Yemeni people. We have fought this war for or to help the people of Yemen. Therefore, the Yemeni government should move to Aden if we want there that we should help them. Aden needs like 10,000 soldiers in order to be secured, and for the Yemeni government to play its role, there should be a leader. We should help the Yemeni. We are not occupants, we are not occupiers. We cannot be in charge of what happens in Yemen. We would be losing if we think so. We would be losing the Yemeni people. So, if the war was imposed, people do not choose wars. Wars impose themselves upon people. People are subject to wars. We were obliged to fight this war if Ali Saleh and the Houthis want the violent solution. I have said this 100 times. Most of the people who know Ali Saleh most is the KSA government. He has been sponsored by the KSA government, and they know him very, very, very well. And they know that Ali Saleh does not have any principle to follow. Now we are paying the price of our mistakes. We should be courageous enough to say so. Ali Saleh can only choose the military solution, and then we would have to do this. Who would lead the battle? Do you want, as we have seen on the TV, the KSA defense minister on the phone in front of the press, and the press saying he is in charge of the war? Not a single minister of defense in the world can lead the war. There should be a leader, a military leader who makes the call and who is in charge. In my opinion, it should be one of the Yemeni leaders. You are the source of Arabs. We have taken our virtues from the Yemeni people. Where are your leaders? Where are your people? So we support the Yemeni people. We are pillars of this war, but we are not occupiers. We cannot be occupiers. We would be occupants of this country if Ali Saleh continues to play this game and we react. Therefore, I think that the Yemeni army is strong. The military tanks are strong. PMP3 is stronger than the Bradley and the Warrior. I am an officer, tank officer. If you want to enter the war, and you should know that it's not a trip. We should be up to the consequences. We talk about the battle. It is very pricey. However, without having a good strategy, good military strategy to manage the conflict, humanitarian help, without having a clear leadership that is organized, we wouldn't be able to find a solution and secure the victory. The government should move from Riyadh to Aden in order to be a Yemeni government and not a Gulf government. We should secure Aden, buy land in order to allow for the government to implement its force, and we should give humanitarian aid, and then we should start by isolating the east and the south. Where would the Houthi military or the Al Hassis military go? We can target them. They are still in Hadramaut. Ali Saleh is still in the eastern provinces. Nobody attacked him. Sheba, Ma'rib are fighting. However, the soldiers are there. Baqiyah are a couple of kilometers away from Saudi Arabia. And the exit of Ktaf, Damaj, Sauda are still under the control of the Houthis. How can you manage an operation without controlling the land, the strategic land? I think that we should move the leadership to Aden. We should create a Yemeni leadership for the conflict. We should be on the ground and occupy the land. Otherwise, there is no military solution, and Ali Saleh will win. Ambassador. Apparently, you are in favor of war in the name of God. I will be based upon the fears that were tackled by Mr. Al-Azmi, and Mr. Abdul Salam talked about the solution coming from bringing together different parties. I would like to add to what has been said that our assessment is the situation in Yemen will be worse because of the geography of Yemen. Other than the sea, we have unstable neighbors. The geographic nature is difficult even for the Yemenis. There is a division in Yemen and it is already there while and alive. I am very pessimistic. If we continue, it will be worse than other Arab countries surrounding us. And I should remind you, if it carries on, but God willing, things will change. Secondly, I would like to remind you all that I am in favor of the political solution. I would like to remind you about 2011 and correct some of the information regarding the Gulf Initiative. In 2011, the political solution was a success and the initiative was a success. And I would like to remind our brothers in Yemen, Sana'a was divided into two and corpses were in the streets. I can remember that we were sitting for days with no electricity and no power, electrical power. So what happened in 2011 is no less than what's happening currently. However, back then, all parties, even Yemenis themselves, and they have resorted to political solution and not military solution. And regarding the immunity, we had two options back then: either giving him the immunity, or we would have like a civil war. And the immunity, anyway, it has come to an end now. And in my opinion, one of the main reasons of the complicated situation is the UN Council decision, and that has put an end to some articles of the initiatives of the GCC. 50-50 government was formed by the Yemeni parties, and our colleagues here can tell you more about this. And some later there was a president elected back then, and we had hoped that the government would regulate the daily life, and then the president would secure the rule of law. However, the disruption was there. We have tried the political solution in Yemen in 2011, and now people who are calling for war or doing away with the political solution, I'm asking them why. I would like to go back to your point and insist that any solution in Yemen should not all the party take part in this solution. Based on my experience, I would tell you that we will find no solution, because one party that is not part of the solution will be always against the solution. We should bring them together in order to find a solution. This is why we should find a solution with the representation from different parties. Any marginalized party will create a problem in the future. Since we had agreed in 2011, and I am surprised to see criticism against one of our solutions. Based on my experience, The ministers used to convene once or twice a week, and as soon as they get to the airport and do this conference and the base, 2-3 hours to find a solution to the crisis. When we took the decision, we found the decision. We have tried the civil war in Yemen, and the initiative had three objectives. First of all, avoiding a civil war in Yemen, that was clear back then. Two, securing a peaceful transition of power. And what happened, the government that was formed and the state that, or the legitimacy that should have played a role, did not assume the responsibility. So why don't we build upon what we have? The GCC initiative is there, and the Gulf Cooperation Council and the UN Council and the international community agreed. And based on this initiative, there's the national dialogue. If our Yemeni brothers deny this, why did you sign? Not yourselves, but your parties, all the parties, the Yemeni parties, signed the initiative of the Gulf and then dialogue, and then you signed, and the same parties signed the peace and partnership agreement. So every time we have something done, we deny it and we destroy it. So this might be the foundation, the basis that complement what we had started, and it might be like a reference material, because the political solution might be the solution in Yemen. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that the discussion from the morning till now reflects what we are suffering from in Yemen. Maybe one or two questions only have been answered. I didn't listen to any good answers. I said that I will not intervene. Unfortunately, I cannot say that I got any answers for my questions. Regarding my intervention, it is a postponed war. This war should have taken place in 2011. Ali Abdullah Saleh had not signed the agreement unless but when he decided that he's ready to go to a war, and now he sees that he is part of the scene. We do not want to destroy the Houthis. We want them back to their normal size. If the current role, and regarding the current war, since the very beginning, we always talk about the necessity of local command post. There are tribes in Al-Jawf that prohibited the Houthi from invading Gulf. Maghreb tribes that joined the legitimacy, the resistance against Al-Qaeda and Adyab, Ta'az resistance, they are all sporadic approaches. The question, the GCC countries can create a joint operations room or center, and ground intervention might be decisive regarding the peaceful or the peace and partnership and dialogue. After the dialogue, the Yemenis had two solutions or two options. It is the fruit of the revolution. With it was facilitated by the GCC initiative. The first option was to build the state, and most of the people who talk today were against the dialogue, and the political elite contributed to reducing the effect of what resulted in from the dialogue. So the Houthis and Ali Abdullah Saleh had decided not to implement the constitution. The peace and partnership agreement is not sound because it was under the force of weapons, under the influence of weapons. So, document that we can use as a reference was the result of the dialogue conference because it included all the parties. So, the diplomatic and military interventions should get the Houthi back to his normal side, and also Ali Abdullah Saleh. We should have a political isolation in exchange for the immunity with his family and with people close to him. If the Houthis' force is reduced to its normal size, it would be ready for dialogue. Today, there is no readiness for dialogue. A militia followed by plane president. This has never happened throughout the history. So, resizing the Houthis movement and isolating Ali Abdullah Saleh and people surrounding him would lay the foundation of the following dialogue, or else we will be postponing another war. Thank you. بعد وحدة مو لازم بدك بعد بعمل وحدة لا أنا بقول لك حاجة People in Oman probably have not understood the Houthi. We are talking about the GC initiative and the peace and partnership agreement. It was forced on the president, and it is like the agreement of the strong against the weak. The Houthi does not believe but in the war. He does not believe in the peace. I have lived in his area. The Houthi does not believe in the war. He participated only to win some time, and every day he used to rely on the military. He only wants the force. Some of the Shias and Sunnis, any person affiliated with the Houthi believes in the supreme leader, the Faqih in Iran, and they follow the leadership of the Ayatollah in Iran. So they have transformed the messengers of God into something to serve their own interest. The Houthi cannot be trusted. The Houthi does not want peace. So I can feel the danger. I am from the Bedouins. We can see the evil in their eyes. I have sat with them and I was imprisoned by them, and I was threatened by them.
It was the first time in my life when a child's gun was aimed at my head, and I thought that if the car goes through a bump or something, it will fire accidentally and kill me. So far as the Gulf countries are media organizations, they chop off the most important part in anybody. We are we are in a tank race in a war, and they show a camel race. So please, brothers, think of us and think of your own security. Al-Arabiya and others. I don't want to take too much of your time, but believe you me, we are suffering. Our houses have been leveled with the ground, and believe you me, the Houthis will continue on this path from now, from our land till Mecca. They have a different mentality. They hold us now and they blame us responsible for events which took place 13 centuries ago. They complain about the death of Hussein. He says, I said to him, I am from Jaham, another tribe, and Hussein was killed by Iraqis in Iraq. And I was imprisoned in Ramadan, and he's and in the end, these people you cannot tolerate. If you spend a week with them, you will come back more speaking more harshly than me. You are Yemenis, or don't go to them as Omani dressed up in the Omani attire. Go to them as Yemeni and see what they do to you. My brother Abdullah is speaking from a human interest point of view. We know what happened in Syria, and we are worried because the Gulf countries left the Houthis to their own devices until they took control of the country. They took all the weapons, and until too late in the day decided to attack the Houthis. Now they say they want to help us. Now you say you want to help us after you allowed Ali Abdullah Saleh to stay in power. You gave him immunity from prosecution, and you allowed the Houthis to expand. Now you want to do us the favor of sending your airplanes to bomb targets. The decisive storm and others. They are speaking as if they are doing us a favor now when bombs are landing on us. What will happen in peacetime? If you really want the struggle to be ours and Arab Iranians, I tell you a story. And Saudi went to a store run by a Yemeni, and the lady says to him, give me a discount because our airplanes are salvaging you from Al-Houthis' control free of charge. This kind of attitude, of course, is very bad. And then now they'll say to us, now that we were stripped of all means of power because of the Gulf countries, now they want to send few airplanes, and they say to us, you do the rest. We've been complaining for years that I don't trust Ali Abdullah Saleh, don't trust the Houthis, but nobody believed us. We have been ignored, and the Gulf Initiative was only presented to save Ali Abdullah Saleh from the revolution and from change in Yemen. Whereas we as Yemeni people, we want our dignity back. We don't want Yemenis to be in every land in the world looking for a job. We want to live in dignity. The Gulf people are not here to save us, the Yemenis. They are trying to save themselves. For us, we will not give up on you. We will fight on your side, but you are not going to save us. The Gulf discourse should be changed. People are attacking man. Now, why don't you say thank you to King Salman? I want bread to reach my people too, not just the missiles, but these means of power were not destroyed when they were a threat to us Yemenis. They were only destroyed when they became a threat to the Saudis and the Gulf. They should have thought of us before. We really need the Yemenis to hear another discourse. Now that we're drowning, they are coming here to say we want to save you. At least they should not put it in this manner. They should say we save each other. And now, unfortunately, they turned Ali Abdullah Saleh into one who's saying that he is protecting the unity of the land. Unfortunately, some Gulf people now are saying this is a war between the North and the South, a very decisive discourse indeed. You should reassure the Yemenis, all Yemenis, that you're not only dragging them into a Syrian-like quagmire, and also they're talking about military intervention. But when we asked to stand steadfast, we are dying of starvation. You can only manage to send weaponry to your aircraft. Can't you send down some food, for example? We don't want tweets on the Twitter saying these things. We want official discourse to say officially that the Gulf countries are committed to rebuilding Yemen, not just destroying it. This will not happen until the Gulf countries say that we'll do this, we'll rebuild Yemen for the sake of the security of the Gulf. We do not have a sectarian problem in Yemen. Iran is trying to create one. This is a fact through the religious schools, etc. But now I'm sitting here, although I do not want to call myself a Muslim or anything because I am a human being, but I belong to the Zaydi faction, and I was among the first people who stood against Al-Houthi and his political and religious stance. So therefore, why are you classifying us and labeling us and branding us? So what Iran cannot manage to do, we are helping them to create. Iran is trying to do that, but it can only do it through us. I said was to Ali Abdullah Saleh when he was really relying on the judiciary to protect him. I said to him, ultimately, I'll say to the Omanis and the United Arab Emirates that our blood will be on your hand. I suffer every time a missile or a rocket goes off. It pains me when it's so. Please remember that this is not in defense of Yemen. Defending Yemen should have happened before. You want to now to defend the agreement that the Houthis imposed by force, and now you're telling us you Yemenis signed it. How can we accept it when it was only forced of us? Because the Gulf countries said to us, if you do not sign, we will not give you any money. So you know what this means. We were ready to die. We are not cowards. This man was carrying his gun, but he gave up his gun and went to for the sake of peace and dignity. So please do not start bartering with us on the peace of peace. I closed my office as a lawyer in search of peace. If you want peace, make peace in the real way, not by saving the Houthis so that they can live to kill us another day. And similarly to what I think next time it will be your turn, Oman and the UAE, similarly to what happened to Saudi Arabia. And the reason is because Saudi Arabia saved him, sorry. And the Saudis, when he was attacked, they took him to their own country and treated him because although he was president for over 30 years, he did not build one hospital to treat him and others. Thank you.
Thank you. It is very hard to express our opinions after hearing the sufferings of the Yemeni brothers and knowing that the crisis will not come to an end tomorrow. I will be talking about a political solution, maybe not on the short run, based on the Lebanese experience, since it has been mentioned in the introduction of the conceptual paper that was attributed. And in fact, there are indeed similarities between Lebanon, the Lebanese situation, and the situation in Yemen. One day, the political solution will come to the table, maybe months later, maybe years later, hopefully not. Based on the Lebanese experience, there are 4 aspects that should be taken into considerations, and maybe the Yemeni brothers, of course, I'm not teaching them what to do, maybe this has already been taken into account. First of all, any political solution should not allow any military party outside of the state or the government. And this is the lesson that we have learned in Lebanon. In the Taif agreement, the constitution of Lebanon, there was a confusion regarding an article regarding the resistance, and this resistance has been used for a sectarian means, and the national resistance has been put aside, and sectarian resistance is now, even if it's fighting Israel, it is fighting Israel under the sectarian umbrella and under the foreign sponsorship. So we should not this to happen. And the second point, that is the political solution should not have a decentralized security system. Maybe security decentralization, such as, for example, keep your weapons and we will keep ours. This is not good. This is another thing that we should avoid, because it highlights the idea of non-state parties. Third point is any division of power should not be based on sectarian foundations and pillars. And of course, the Lebanese experience in this context, before the war and after the war, is clear. We should not build a state based on giving the rights of sub-citizenship. So the rights should be given to citizens, political parties. The constitution should not have rights given to extra state groups. The fourth point, especially for our Omani brothers, based on what His Excellency the Ambassador has said, or a doctor who talked in the morning, we should understand the importance of the sponsorship or the patronage of the political solution. If it will allow the infiltration of the Iranians to sponsor this political decision, we would reach a similar solution to what's happened in Lebanon, because Iran will have some rights to oversee the actions of parties within Yemen. I am talking about similarity or analogy with Lebanon after the Taif agreement, the new constitution. The Syrian regime was given the opportunity, when, of course, in partnership with Iran, and with the decline of the Syrian regime, Iran is now overseeing the protection of the party that was protected by the Syrian regime. Of course, I'm not trying to teach you what to do. I was just sharing some of the Lebanese experience. Thank you, Mr. Ryan. In the name of God, I will be talking based on a different vision than Mr. Khalid and Sheikh Abdullah. I will be starting with the initiative of the GCC countries that was mentioned by His Excellency the Ambassador. I am against the attack against this initiative. His Excellency the Ambassador knows that Ali Abdullah Saleh and the other party, there was like a balance for the revolutionary party. There was a balance of power. So there was a military balance, and none of the parties could win the battle. And the representative of the United Nations used to tell, if you have the opportunity to win the war, go ahead and do it. And on the other hand, he would tell Ali Abdullah Saleh, do the same. But none of the two parties could do so. So we cannot, or we should not, attack the Gulf Initiative now. There was this balance of power, and there was the negotiation in Abu Dhabi, and there was a secure political solution. Back then, it was a secure political solution, and I repeat, had the GCC initiative been applied, we wouldn't have reached this. The problem is that the GCC brothers, after signing the initiative, they put it aside, and they have given the responsibility to the UN representative, and he is responsible for a lot of what happened. However, the overall position of the Gulf countries was noble. So we should not think that anything that comes from the GCC is evil. This is wrong. The second point that was mentioned by Mr. Khalid regarding the speech of the GCC countries. After the fall of Amran, our brothers in Saudi Arabia suggested interfering to liberate Amran and driving the Houthis back to Sauda. And they said they are ready to pay the price. However, parties within the power in Yemen refused this agreement. So I'm against demonizing the GCC countries. This is not at the service of the Yemeni cause. And history will reveal what has truly happened. However, saying that anything that comes from GCC countries, our brothers in Oman and the UAE, have evil acts, I am against this speech. There has been mistakes. GCC countries did away with the reconciliation government. There was a decision to regarding the oil derivatives. There was no support by the Gulf countries, and of course, I'm talking what's positive and negative about the GCC approach, and there has been another point tackled several times, talking about the strength of the Houthis. I think this is not correct. The Houthis, since their very movement, first movement in January last year, they didn't fight a real battle. The only real battle was in Damaj. Damaj was a village that is made of 200 houses, a group of Salafi students. They could resist for 90 days, and the Salafis failed after the mediation from the president, and the Houthis, I repeat, did not fight a real battle. They went to Amran and they faced no military forces, but the Amran also had a political decision taken. Sana'a fell with no battle. It was besieged, and there was no resistance. So attacking the military, humiliating the military this way is not good. The army did not fight. The leadership did not use the military, did not use the army. The last point is regarding Al Qaeda, which is a very important point. First of all, the tribes. The bad speech is saying that anything that comes from the tribes is evil. The tribes of the north fought against the Houthis in Amra, the Shafi'id. I was at the office of the governor. 30 a few number of Houthis entered the province with 2 million population. So this speech against the tribes is wrong because we would be driving them to support Saleh and the Houthis. We cannot say that the tribes of the north are underdeveloped. Ali Abdullah Saleh has ruled for 30 years and everybody's saying that he has no plan to build the state, and now we are talking against the tribes. Where was the project developed by Ali Abdullah Saleh and tribes fought against it? The tribes of the north are very disciplined, and the Houthi managed or ruled these regions, and the people started following the rules of the Houthi movement. Thank you, Dr. Hassan Johar. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With every intervention, we have more points to tackle. I would like, however, to focus on 3 main points very briefly in order to allow for other people to express their opinions. First of all, for a long period of time, and as we have heard today, we talk about how the Houthis not being a big part of Yemen. Some of the speakers talked about 8% of Houthis in Yemen. Be realistic, please, especially Yemenis. We do not know maybe about the proportion, the percentage, sources. If they're only 3%, but they're 3%, and they have no power, why an alliance of 10 countries is facing them? It is a very realistic, honest question. Why need 10 countries in alliance, Egypt, Pakistan, Morocco, Jordan, against 3% of the people? This is unrealistic. We are contradicting ourselves as Gulf countries and Gulf armies. And now there's a suggestion to create a force, unified force. If we cannot fight 3% of the people, we will be humiliating our military force. So let us be realistic and let us give real figures, real numbers, and the scenarios to find solutions to these problems. Dear brother, Mr. Abdul Salam, said as if we want to repeat the Syrian experience. You are suggesting setting up new armies. I will be giving you the example of the Syrian revolution. It started 4 years ago. It started with the Free Syrian Army. It started resisting the regime's army, supporting the people of Syria. Now it is the weakest military division in Syria. Now Syria, the United States, Turkey, GCC countries are forming a new army of 5,000 trainees per year. So it needs a lot of time before this army will be able to carry out field tasks and become in charge. The biggest military in Syria now is the ISIL army, whether we like it or not. If we want to oust a regime and have another regime in place. Some people are trying to portray Al Qaeda as a good alternative.
البديل الآن في سوريا هي القاعدة شئت أم
The
أبيت.
alternative in Syria today is Al Qaeda as a strong military power that is occupying 70% of the Syrian territories. Can you deny this? Then your alternative in Yemen is Al Qaeda as well.
اليوم البديل
And
الجديد في اليمن
now,
القاعدة.
so Al
البديل
Qaeda is the
للإطلاق
alternative in Yemen.
العراق اللي يمثل الآن
What happened in
السنة
Iraq?
القاعدة أو
People
داعش
representing, or the party that represents the Sunnis in Iraq is ISIL or Al Qaeda.
تتبنى أو يتم تبنيها
It is
في
true
معينة
that
برهان وعندها فكر ايديولوجيا عندها
these parties have
بشكل كبير
local considerations. However, they have their own ideology that is expanding throughout the Arab world. So,
في مثل هذه الحروب والأضعاف أنت شوف الدول
making Arab countries participate in these wars is weakening them. Now in Egypt, there's a war between the military and terrorism. The Syrian military was destroyed. The Iraqi army was destroyed. Now in Yemen, despite some of the remarks regarding the military, the fifth largest army is being destroyed. Where do we have any armies left? And the Arab armies are fighting each other. We have forgotten about the Arab-Israeli fight. We are talking about the Arab-Iranian fight today. So we have a lot of changing concepts and ideas. The GCC armies are today being involved in these wars. So when it comes to political concepts, military is cover to change some situations that should be replaced by diplomacy, dialogue, de facto forces. A lot of points have been achieved in Yemen. There is UN Resolution Chapter 7 initiatives, Gulf initiatives. There are initiatives between the Yemenis, whether you accept these initiatives or not. This is your problem. You do not want us to help you with the war or with the dialogue or supporting this party against the other. What would the solution be? Continuous violence? I think that the Yemenis themselves, you have two initiatives. Do you don't like them? Do a third one. The peace and partnership was under the threat of weapons. The national dialogue. Activate this initiative as to talking about the forming an army, invading Yemen, and resistance. I don't think it would do you any good. No country in the world would go to ground battles and sacrifices, and any loss would be historical, diplomatic, and political. This is why the GCC countries used airstrikes only, and they can justify this decision. So before it's too late, before it becomes more complicated, there is a political and legal umbrella. So we should work on the dialogue approach. We should work on the initiatives between the internal Yemeni parties, and then we can kickstart a new era. I have a remark, Mr. Khalid talked about it the past. You have been talking about the sectarian conflicts and talking about what Sheikh Sudais said. This is not true. This video is fake, although it was not denied. Our scholars, of course, do not use these means, and of course, I just wanted to say that that was fake. That we still have 4 or 5 people. Mr. Dr. Burhan. I am here to listen because we are very interested in what's happening in Yemen, because we are also suffering in Syria and we are all suffering from the same problem. There is a lot of common ground. There is similar personality. There's a similar context. I would like to reply to what was said by our colleague who said that ISIS is the strongest power in Syria. I don't think that ISIS is the biggest problem for the Arabs. There are two other main problems other than ISIL. It is like disease that has been allowed by different parties. I think that Yemen is part of these Arab countries that witnessed the same events, and we have two big major problems, and we cannot find any answers in Yemen, Syria, Egypt, and there were no solutions. Not a real dialogue took place. So we cannot take like a final decision, and we cannot reach a solution. So what is the two problems that we can talk about? The first one is regional, a geostrategic problem that was mentioned by Dr. Khalid very very briefly, but it needs to be more detailed. The Arab world is a vacuum, is divided. It has no power, no muscle force. Any neighboring force is capable of infiltrating and expanding in this world. Had Iran been Sunni, it would have done the same. It is not. It has nothing to do with religion. Religion is being used as a strategy. However, the geostrategic rules are essential. The reaction was in the Gulf when the danger became closer, but to which extent we can talk about the long-term retaliation. It was a reaction. It is an important reaction. It might be encouraging, but because the environment, the regional environment and the international environment changed. For the first time, UN resolution, we have seen a UN Council resolution after 4 failures, the diplomatic failures at the level of the UN. So we should know how to restore regional balance between conflicting Arab countries. Except for GCC countries, they have a minimum of understanding among each other that was reflected by this alliance, and we should identify whether the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has a vision. The second deeper and more dangerous problem is that in our countries, the social pact no longer exists. Inside the countries, there is no project. People used to be unified by, for example, nationalists. We are all Arabs, we have an Arab identity. Later on, we started talking about countries, nations, and each country wanted to improve the situation. So the national state failed because it couldn't achieve its objectives, and it was destroyed by a few people who ruled. The problem is that we no longer believe in the nationalist approach, even if we have a speech like the one Dr. Azmi suggested. Nobody would respond positively. Even if you talk about national pride, people would be laughing at you because they would see who is using these concepts. It is being used by the people who stole the resources of the people. Gaddafi, Bashar Assad, Ali Abdullah Saleh, while in reality they are as far as they can be from being nationalists. So, how can we restore a common project, a common vision for the people to get together within the countries based on responsibilities and obligations and a vision for the future? I think it's very important, and I think it explains the lack of common grounds. Of course, today religion is no longer bringing us together. It is dividing us. There's no common agenda, common political vision to bring people together. We are in constant conflict. There is a political, ideological vacuum, and parties are relying on foreign support or tribal support in order to attack this vulnerable structure for personal interests, whether Houthis or other. The solution to put an end to this lack of national culture needs a lot of political, cultural development and advancement and the dialogue between the people, not only between the elected parties. What we can do today, this complicated problem, regional, local, sectarian, religious, there is no simple solution. There should be at least a local agenda with the participation of everybody. Any temporary solution to put an end to the war, the shedding of blood. Economic suffering also brings people together. Some people coexist together because they have common economic interests. For example, a development project like Marshall Project in Yemen and Syria. This is very important, and this would boost the morale of people, and they would have prospects of peace. Dialogue, like formal dialogues, are only about lies. We need to find common grounds to do away with this failure.
I'm sorry, but we have really gone. We have run out of time. We are 1 hour late, and the translators have to leave there. I just want to talk a little bit about the sectarian question through what I hear today. I hear that the sectarian discourse has harmed us and benefited Iran, although Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries not as they speak in terms of sectarianism, but they, as far as their deeds are not sectarian. And with Iran, it's the other way around. Iran really speaks about democracy, but in terms of sectarianism. This is just a coincidence, the chair is saying. So therefore, we must reduce this sectarian discourse. From the days of Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab, nobody done anything in Oman, but our brothers in Oman believe that the Salafis want to harm them. But people who do not belong to the Sunni schools of thought do not believe Iran has a sectarian agenda, and you should never mind what the Sudais or others are saying. from the days which go back even before the Iranian Revolution, the situation has changed. The Iranian Revolution, we do not talk about all the Shias, but Iran wants to use Shiaism as a vehicle. And also, so far as the military intervention in Yemen is concerned, I think any intervention on the ground is difficult, and if the objectives are to stop any missiles from Iran reaching the Houthis, then an air blockade will be enough. But if we want to restore the legitimacy inside Yemen, we really need the Yemeni factions on the ground. And if the Yemenis come up with a successful plan, thank you very much. I thank all the participants, whether as panelists or the people who commented or posed questions. The workshop was successful to answer at least some of our questions, and see you in future events. Thank you.